history is supposed to be the factual record of what happened. Sometimes governments, institutions, and powerful people decide certain facts are inconvenient and delete them from the official story. 1. The Soviet Union systematically erased people from photographs and history books when they fell out of favor with Stalin. The most famous example is Nikolai Yezhov, head of the NKVD secret police during the Great Purge. Yezhov was responsible for executing hundreds of thousands of Stalin's perceived enemies. A famous photograph from 1937 shows Stalin standing beside a canal with Yezhov at his side. In 1940, after Yezhov himself was arrested and executed as an enemy of the people, Soviet censors physically airbrushed him out of the photograph. The edited version showed Stalin standing alone beside the canal. This wasn't an isolated incident. The Soviets edited hundreds of photographs removing purged officials. Leon Trotsky, a key figure in the Bolshevik Revolution and Lenin's close associate, was systematically removed from Soviet history after losing the power struggle to Stalin. Photos showing Trotsky with Lenin were altered or destroyed. History books were rewritten to minimize or eliminate Trotsky's role in the revolution. Soviet encyclopedias literally had pages about Trotsky that subscribers were instructed to cut out and replace with pages about other topics. The Soviet practice of deleting people from history became so well known that George Orwell's 1984 featured a character whose job was rewriting historical records. The stupidity of Soviet historical erasure is that the original photos still existed outside the USSR, making the doctored versions obviously fake and undermining Soviet credibility. Trying to erase people from history just made their erasure more famous. 2. The Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989 was almost completely deleted from Chinese history books and internet. On June 3rd or 4th, 1989, the Chinese government violently suppressed pro-democracy protests in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, killing hundreds or possibly thousands of protesters. The Tank Man photo of a lone protester blocking a column of tanks became one of the most iconic images of the 20th century, everywhere except China. The Chinese government immediately began a massive censorship campaign. References to the massacre were deleted from textbooks, newspapers, and official histories. Internet searches for Tiananmen or June 4 are blocked in China. People arrested for posting about the anniversary. Students born after 1989 often have no idea the massacre happened. When shown the famous Tank Man photo, many young Chinese don't recognize it or know what it depicts. The government's official position is that nothing significant happened on June 4, 1989. However, the stupidity of trying to delete such a massive, internationally witnessed event is that everyone outside China knows what happened. Survivors living abroad tell their stories. Foreign media extensively documented the massacre. China's attempt to erase Tiananmen from history made the censorship itself a story, ensuring the massacre is remembered internationally even as it's forgotten domestically. The deletion is so extreme that parents who witnessed the massacre often don't tell their own children what they saw because they fear repercussions. 3. American history textbooks for decades minimized or deleted the true horror of slavery and presented a romanticized version of the antebellum South. Textbooks used in southern states particularly presented slavery in sanitized terms, describing enslaved people as workers or servants rather than slaves. Some textbooks claimed slaves were generally content and well treated by benevolent masters. The brutal realities of slavery, families torn apart, routine rape, torture, murder, and dehumanization, were deleted or glossed over. Some textbooks even suggested slavery was economically beneficial to black people, giving them Christianity and civilization. This wasn't ancient history. Textbooks with these lies were used into the 1970s and some remain in circulation. The lost cause mythology that portrayed the Confederacy as fighting for states' rights rather than slavery was taught as fact. Robert E. Lee and other Confederate generals were presented as honorable men fighting for their homeland rather than as traitors fighting to preserve slavery. The deletion of slavery's true horror from textbooks allowed generations of Americans to grow up without understanding the foundation of racial inequality. The stupidity of this historical deletion is that primary sources, slave narratives, auction records, plantation documents, and photographs, always existed, proving slavery's brutality. Modern historians have corrected the record, but the damage of decades of deleted truth shaped American racial attitudes. States are still fighting over how to teach slavery in schools, with some wanting to continue deleting the full truth. 4. Japanese history textbooks have controversially deleted, minimized, or whitewashed Japan's World War II atrocities, including the rape of Nanking, comfort women, and human experimentation. In 1937, Japanese forces occupied Nanking and engaged in 6 weeks of mass murder, rape, and destruction. Estimates suggest 300,000 Chinese civilians and disarmed soldiers were killed, and 80,000 women were raped. Japanese textbooks for decades minimized this event, with some describing it as an incident rather than a massacre. Some textbooks barely mentioned it or deleted references entirely. The comfort women system, where Japan forced approximately 200,000 women, mostly Korean, into sexual slavery for Japanese soldiers, was deleted from many textbooks, or described in minimal terms that obscured the systematic nature. Unit 731, where Japanese scientists conducted horrific human experiments, including vivisection, biological weapons testing, and torture on Chinese prisoners, was completely deleted from most Japanese textbooks. Modern Japanese textbook controversies continue, with nationalist politicians demanding deletions of negative history. China and Korea have repeatedly protested Japanese textbook whitewashing. The stupidity of deleting or minimizing these atrocities is that survivors exist, extensive documentation exists, and neighboring countries remember what Japan tries to forget. Japan's textbook deletions have damaged relationships with Asian neighbors and created distrust that persists decades later. 5. Christopher Columbus's actual actions were deleted from American history books, which instead portrayed him as a noble explorer. For generations, American students learned that Columbus discovered America and was a visionary explorer. What was deleted? Columbus didn't discover anything, as millions of people already lived in the Americas. He never set foot in what's now the United States. He died thinking he'd reached Asia. More importantly, deleted from textbooks were Columbus's treatment of indigenous people. Columbus enslaved the Taino people of Hispaniola, forcing them to search for gold under threat of death. Those who didn't bring enough gold had their hands cut off. Columbus's own journals described kidnapping indigenous women and children for slavery and sexual exploitation. His governance was so brutal that even the Spanish crown arrested him. Under Columbus and his brothers' rule, the indigenous Taino population of Hispaniola collapsed from approximately 250,000 to near extinction through murder, disease, and brutal labor. For centuries, American textbooks deleted these facts and presented Columbus as a hero worthy of a national holiday. The stupidity of this deletion is that Columbus's own writings documenting his atrocities survived, making the sanitized textbook version obviously false once examined. Modern historians have corrected the record, but Columbus Day is still a federal holiday, showing how difficult it is to reverse historical deletions even after truth is revealed. 6. The role of women scientists, mathematicians, and inventors was systematically deleted from history books, with their contributions attributed to men, or simply omitted. Rosalind Franklin's crucial X-ray crystallography work that enabled the discovery of DNA structure was deleted from the story. Watson and Crick received the Nobel Prize, while Franklin's contribution was minimized or ignored in textbooks. Lisa Meitner's role in discovering nuclear fission was deleted, with credit going to male colleague Otto Hahn, who won the Nobel Prize alone. Ada Lovelace's work as the first computer programmer was deleted for over a century. Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, NASA mathematicians whose calculations were crucial for space missions, were deleted from space program histories until recent decades. Women's contributions to World War II code-breaking at Bletchley Park were classified and deleted from public histories for 50 years. The pattern repeated across fields. Women's work was deleted, minimized, or attributed to male colleagues. The stupidity of these deletions is that documentation of women's contributions existed in archives, letters, and records. Modern historians recovering these deleted stories found extensive evidence proving women's roles. The deletions harmed not just the individuals erased, but generations of girls who didn't see women in STEM histories. 7. Native American history and genocide were largely deleted from American textbooks, which jumped from exploration to settling the frontier, without explaining what happened to millions of indigenous people. Textbooks use terms like settlement and expansion instead of colonization and displacement. The systematic genocide of indigenous peoples through warfare, disease, and forced relocation was minimized or deleted. The Trail of Tears that killed thousands of Cherokee was mentioned briefly, if at all. The Sand Creek Massacre, Wounded Knee, and hundreds of other massacres were deleted. The U.S. government's systematic destruction of indigenous cultures through boarding schools, where children were forcibly assimilated and forbidden to speak their languages, was deleted. The fact that the United States broke virtually every treaty made with native nations was deleted. Textbooks portrayed indigenous people as obstacles to progress, who conveniently disappeared rather than as victims of genocide. The stupidity of these deletions is that indigenous people still exist and remember what was done to their ancestors. Treaties exist, documenting broken promises. Boarding schools operated into the 1970s with living survivors. The deleted history is well documented in government records, making the textbook omissions obviously dishonest. Modern efforts to include accurate Native American history face resistance from those who prefer the deleted version, where America's expansion was heroic rather than genocidal. 8. The CIA's MK-Ultra program of mind control experiments on unwitting Americans was deleted from public knowledge for decades through classification. From the 1950s, 1970s, the CIA conducted illegal experiments testing mind control, interrogation techniques, and behavior modification. Experiments included giving LSD to unwitting Americans, torture, sensory deprivation, and abuse. American and Canadian citizens were experimented on without consent. Some victims developed permanent psychological damage or died. The entire program was classified and deleted from public knowledge. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered MK-Ultra files destroyed to prevent them from being discovered. Most records were destroyed successfully. However, in 1977, Freedom of Information Act requests uncovered 20,000 documents that had survived. Congressional hearings revealed the program's extent. The stupidity of trying to delete MK-Ultra through classification and destruction is that enough documents survived to prove the program existed. Victims and their families demanded accountability. The deletion attempt failed and made the CIA look worse than if they'd admitted it earlier. MK-Ultra became a famous example of government abuse, ensuring the deleted program is now well known. 9. Thomas Jefferson's relationship with enslaved woman Sally Hemings was deleted from most history books for nearly 200 years. Jefferson fathered at least 6 children with Hemings, who was his property and his late wife's half-sister. Hemings was approximately 14 when the relationship began. The relationship was non-consensual, as an enslaved person cannot consent to her enslaver. This was documented in Jefferson's time. Abolitionist James Callender published the story in 1802. Hemings's descendants maintained oral histories of their Jefferson ancestry. Yet history books deleted this fact for nearly 2 centuries. Jefferson was presented as a noble founding father, without mention of his sexual exploitation of enslaved women. Historians dismiss the Hemings story as rumor or slander. DNA evidence in 1998 confirmed that Jefferson fathered Hemings' children. The stupidity of deleting this well-documented fact for 200 years is that the evidence always existed: Jefferson's records, contemporary accounts, and family testimony. The deletion served to sanitize Jefferson's image but undermined historical accuracy. Modern textbooks finally include the relationship, but debates continue about how to describe it. 10. The Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, where a white mob destroyed a prosperous black neighborhood killing hundreds, was deleted from Oklahoma history books for decades. On May 31st, June 1st, 1921, white mobs attacked the Greenwood district of Tulsa, known as Black Wall Street. Over 35 city blocks were destroyed. An estimated 300 black residents were killed. Over 1,000 black homes and businesses were burned. Thousands were left homeless. The massacre was deleted from Oklahoma history textbooks. Many Tulsa residents born after 1921 never learned about it. Newspapers' coverage was destroyed or removed from archives. Death certificates and records were altered or destroyed. Insurance claims were denied. The event was effectively erased from official history. It wasn't taught in Oklahoma schools for 70-plus years. Survivors who tried to tell their stories were silenced. The stupidity of deleting such a massive, well-witnessed event is that thousands of people knew what happened. Photos of the destruction existed. Survivors lived for decades trying to get recognition. The deletion made the massacre worse by denying victims justice and preventing accountability. Oklahoma only officially acknowledged the massacre in the 1990s and included it in school curricula in 2002, over 80 years later. 11. The role of the Soviet Union in defeating Nazi Germany was minimized or deleted from Western Cold War-era textbooks, which emphasized American-British contributions. The Eastern Front, where the USSR fought Germany, was the largest and deadliest theater of W-42s. The Soviet Union suffered approximately 27 million deaths, more than all other Allied nations combined. The Soviets destroyed approximately 80% of German military forces. Battles like Stalingrad and Kursk were decisive in defeating Germany. Yet Cold War-era Western textbooks minimized or deleted Soviet contributions, focusing on D-Day and Western Front battles. Students learned W-42 as primarily an American-British victory, with Soviets barely mentioned. The Nazi-Soviet pact was emphasized while Soviet sacrifice was deleted. The stupidity of this deletion is that W-42's outcome is well documented. Soviet contributions are historical fact regardless of Cold War politics. The deletion created a distorted understanding of W-42 that downplayed the war's reality. Modern historians have corrected this, acknowledging Soviet sacrifices while also noting Stalin's atrocities. 12. Warren G. Harding's love letters revealing his affair in crude language were deleted from public records for decades. Harding, the 29th president, had an affair with Carrie Phillips, his friend's wife. He wrote hundreds of explicit love letters to Phillips over 15 years. After Harding's death, the Republican Party paid Phillips hush money and locked the letters away. The letters were kept sealed in the Library of Congress until 2014, nearly a century after they were written. When finally released, they revealed Harding using crude language about sex and referring to his penis as Jerry. The deletion wasn't for national security. It was to preserve a dead president's image. The stupidity is that deleting personal letters for a century just made their eventual release more scandalous and ensured Harding is now remembered more for his affair than his presidency. 13. The Bengal famine of 1943 that killed 3 million Indians was largely deleted from British history and minimized in Churchill's legacy. While Britain fought W-1, policies implemented by Winston Churchill's government contributed to famine in Bengal. Churchill's government diverted food from India to Britain and British troops. When informed of deaths, Churchill reportedly asked why Gandhi hadn't died yet and said Indians were breeding like rabbits. He refused aid and blocked other countries from sending relief. The famine killed approximately 3 million people. British textbooks largely deleted this famine from WW2 histories, focusing on the Blitz and heroic British resistance. Churchill's role was deleted from his celebrated biography. The stupidity of deleting this massive tragedy is that it's well documented in British government records. Indians remember what Britons deleted. Modern historians have recovered the truth, but Churchill is still celebrated in Britain, while his role in the famine is little known outside academic circles. 14. The Tuskegee syphilis study, where the U.S. government deliberately left black men untreated for syphilis, was deleted from public knowledge for 40 years. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service studied untreated syphilis in black men in Alabama. Researchers told subjects they were receiving treatment for bad blood, but actually gave them placebos. Even after penicillin became available as a cure in the 1940s, researchers deliberately didn't treat subjects to continue studying syphilis's progression. Men died, went blind, suffered mental illness, and infected wives and children, all while researchers documented but didn't treat them. The study continued for 40 years before a whistleblower leaked it to the press in 1972. Congressional hearings followed. The government apologized in 1997. The stupidity of classifying this study and deleting it from public knowledge is that hundreds of people were involved. The truth eventually came out, causing massive distrust of medical authorities in Black communities that persists today. The deletion made the betrayal worse by adding decades of cover-up to medical abuse. 15. The My Lai massacre, where U.S. soldiers killed hundreds of Vietnamese civilians, was initially covered up and deleted from official reports. On March 16, 1968, American soldiers killed 347,504 unarmed civilians in the village of My Lai, including women, children, and elderly. Soldiers raped women and girls before killing them. The massacre was initially covered up by military authorities. Reports described it as a successful battle against Viet Cong forces. Evidence was deleted or classified. The truth only emerged over a year later when helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson, who had intervened to stop the killing, and photographer Ronald Haberly came forward. Investigative journalist Seymour Hersh broke the story publicly. Army initially denied it, then minimized it. The cover-up attempt failed spectacularly when photos of murdered civilians were published. The stupidity of trying to delete such a massive war crime is that too many people witnessed it. The cover-up made the massacre worse by adding conspiracy to the crime. Only one soldier, Lieutenant William Calley, was convicted, serving minimal time, showing how thoroughly the military tried to bury the truth. 16. Henrietta Lacks's story was deleted from medical histories even though her cells, HeLa cells, revolutionized medicine. In 1951, doctors at Johns Hopkins Hospital took cervical cancer cells from Henrietta Lacks, a Black woman, without her knowledge or consent. Her cells were the first immortal human cell line. They could reproduce indefinitely in laboratory conditions. HeLa cells became crucial for medical research, including developing the polio vaccine, cancer research, HIV/AIDS research, and countless medical advances. Companies made billions from her cells. Henrietta Lacks herself was deleted from the story. Her cells were used for decades without her family knowing. Medical textbooks discussed HeLa cells without mentioning the human being they came from. Her identity was hidden or misreported. Her family lived in poverty while companies profited from her cells. The stupidity of deleting Henrietta Lacks from her own cell's story is that eventually someone would ask where HeLa cells came from. Her family discovered the truth in the 1970s. The story was finally told publicly in 2010. The deletion revealed medical racism and consent violations that damaged trust in medical research. 17. The internment of Japanese Americans during Aritawadus was minimized in American textbooks for decades, described as relocation rather than imprisonment. After Pearl Harbor, 120,000 Japanese Americans, two-thirds of whom were U.S. citizens, were forcibly removed from their homes and imprisoned in camps surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. They lost homes, businesses, and possessions. Children were held in camps for years. The internment was based on racism, not military necessity. Textbooks deleted or minimized this massive civil rights violation, using euphemisms like relocation centers instead of concentration camps or prisons. The economic losses and trauma were deleted from histories. The stupidity of this deletion is that 120,000 people and their families knew what happened. Photos of the camps exist. The U.S. government eventually apologized and paid reparations in 1988, implicitly admitting the textbook deletions had been covering up an injustice. Modern textbooks include it more honestly, but for decades students learned a sanitized version where internment was presented as a reasonable wartime precaution rather than racist imprisonment. 18. Stalin's estimated 20 million deaths through executions, gulags, and forced famines were deleted from Soviet histories, which instead portrayed him as a great leader. Stalin's purges killed millions. The Holodomor famine in Ukraine that killed 3-5 million through deliberate starvation was covered up. Gulags imprisoned millions with estimates of 1.6 million deaths. Soviet textbooks deleted these atrocities and portrayed Stalin as a wise leader who industrialized the USSR and defeated fascism. Photos were altered to remove executed officials. Statistics were falsified to hide deaths. Witnesses were silenced or killed. The stupidity of trying to delete Stalin's crimes is that they were so massive that evidence couldn't all be destroyed. Survivors existed. Documents survived. When glasnost allowed more openness in the 1980s, the truth about Stalin's crimes emerged from Soviet archives themselves. The deletion had created a false history that collapsed when examined, damaging the Soviet Union's credibility. 19. The role of black soldiers in American wars was systematically deleted or minimized in history books. Black soldiers fought in the Revolutionary War, Civil War, both World Wars, and every American conflict, but textbooks deleted or minimized their contributions. The Buffalo Soldiers who served in the Western frontier were barely mentioned. The Tuskegee Airmen who never lost a bomber they escorted in WW2 were deleted from many WW2 histories. Black soldiers who fought in segregated units facing discrimination from their own military while fighting for freedom abroad were deleted from the story. The 761st Tank Battalion that served with Patton's army was deleted. Black contributions were systematically erased while white contributions were celebrated. The stupidity of these deletions is that military records exist documenting black service. Photographs, medals, and documents proved black soldiers' contributions. Families remembered what textbooks deleted. Modern efforts to correct the record have recovered many deleted stories, but damage was done by generations learning white-centric military history. 20. Emmett Till's murder was initially covered up and deleted from national attention until his mother's actions forced the story public. In 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by white men in Mississippi for allegedly whistling at a white woman. His murderers were acquitted by an all-white jury despite confessing to the murder in a magazine interview after acquittal. Mississippi authorities and much of white America tried to delete the story and move on. Emmett's mother, Mamie Till, insisted on an open casket funeral, forcing the world to see what had been done to her son. Photos of Till's mutilated body in the casket shocked the nation and helped spark the civil rights movement. The stupidity of trying to delete Till's murder through an obvious sham trial and media silence is that his mother refused to let America forget. The deletion attempt backfired, ensuring Till's name became a rallying cry for civil rights rather than a forgotten victim. 21. The Armenian Genocide of 1915 to 1923, where 1.5 million Armenians were killed by the Ottoman Empire, has been denied and deleted by the Turkish government for over a century. Ottoman Turkey systematically massacred Armenians in what historians recognize as genocide. Turkey has spent a century denying, minimizing, and deleting references to the genocide. Turkish textbooks don't use the word genocide and describe the events as wartime casualties from legitimate military actions. Turkey pressures other countries to not recognize the genocide. Scholars in Turkey who call it genocide face prosecution. The stupidity of Turkey's century-long deletion attempt is that extensive documentation exists. Survivor testimonies, photographs, diplomatic reports, and historical records from multiple countries. Armenia and the Armenian diaspora ensure the genocide is remembered. Over 30 countries officially recognize it as genocide. Turkey's denial and deletion efforts have failed internationally while creating a false domestic history. 22. J. Edgar Hoover's secret files on politicians, celebrities, and activists were deleted or destroyed, but enough survived to reveal decades of illegal surveillance and blackmail. As FBI director for 48 years, Hoover maintained secret files on thousands of Americans, including presidents, members of Congress, civil rights leaders, and entertainers. He used information for blackmail and to maintain power. Files included surveillance of Martin Luther King Jr.'s personal life to discredit him. After Hoover's death in 1972, many files were destroyed by his secretary on his orders. Congressional investigations revealed that enough files survived to document widespread illegal activities. The stupidity of Hoover's attempt to delete evidence of his surveillance state is that the FBI is a bureaucracy that keeps copies. Victims knew they'd been surveilled. Whistleblowers revealed programs. The deletion attempt was only partially successful, and what survived proved the illegal nature of Hoover's FBI. 23. The Ludlow Massacre, where Colorado National Guard and company guards killed striking miners and their families in 1914, was deleted from many labor history accounts. Coal miners struck for better conditions in Colorado. Mine companies evicted families who moved to tent colonies. On April 20, 1914, Colorado National Guard and company guards attacked the tent colony at Ludlow. They set fire to tents, killing 25 people, including 11 children, who suffocated hiding from gunfire. The massacre sparked violence across Colorado. The Ludlow Massacre was deleted from many American history textbooks despite being well documented. Labor history was systematically minimized in favor of industrial progress narratives. The stupidity of deleting Ludlow is that it was a major news event photographed and reported nationwide. Families of victims kept the memory alive. Labor historians preserved the truth. Modern textbooks increasingly include labor struggles previously deleted. 24. The Wilmington Insurrection of 1898, where white supremacists overthrew an elected government and killed black residents, was deleted from history as a race riot. In Wilmington, North Carolina, white supremacists led a coup d'etat against the elected biracial government. On November 10, 1898, armed white supremacists destroyed black-owned businesses, killed an estimated 6,300 black residents, and forced elected officials to resign at gunpoint. They installed their own government in the only successful coup in American history. Textbooks deleted this as a coup and instead called it a race riot, language that implied black residents were rioting rather than being massacred. The organized overthrow of a legitimate government was deleted from the story. The stupidity of this deletion is that the coup was planned openly with white supremacist newspapers announcing their intentions. The violence was photographed. Government records documented what happened. Modern historians have corrected the record, but for a century it was deleted from American history as a successful violent overthrow of democracy. 25. Alan Turing's prosecution for homosexuality and forced chemical castration was deleted from history, celebrating him as the father of computer science. Turing broke the Nazi Enigma code, helping win W and pioneered computer science. In 1952, he was prosecuted for homosexuality, which was illegal in Britain. Rather than prison, he accepted chemical castration through hormone treatments. He died in 1954 of cyanide poisoning, likely suicide. For decades, textbooks celebrated Turing's code-breaking but deleted his persecution and death. His sexuality and prosecution were erased from official histories. Britain didn't apologize until 2009, and only pardoned Turing in 2013, 59 years after his death. The stupidity of deleting Turing's persecution is that it revealed how Britain treated a war hero. The deletion made Britain's homophobia worse by covering it up. When the full story finally emerged, it damaged Britain's W2 narrative and led to pardons for thousands persecuted under the same laws. 26. The Rosewood Massacre in Florida, where a white mob destroyed a black town in 1923, was deleted from Florida history for 70 years. In January 1923, a white woman in Sumner, Florida, claimed a black man attacked her. White mobs attacked the nearby black town of Rosewood. Over several days, mobs burned homes and killed residents. The town was completely destroyed with 6 to 8 confirmed deaths, though survivors reported many more. Rosewood's black residents fled and never returned. The town ceased to exist. For 70 years, Rosewood was deleted from Florida history. It wasn't taught in schools. Maps no longer showed it. Survivors were silenced. In the 1980s, journalists investigated after hearing rumors. Survivors finally told their stories. Florida eventually acknowledged the massacre in 1994 and compensated survivors. The stupidity of trying to delete an entire town's destruction is that survivors and their descendants knew what happened. The deletion lasted decades but couldn't last forever. When revealed, it showed Florida's long history of racial violence that had been carefully deleted. 27. Medical experiments on Black Americans, Puerto Ricans, and poor people were deleted from medical histories. Beyond Tuskegee, numerous unethical experiments were conducted and deleted from public knowledge. Guatemala syphilis experiments, where U.S. researchers infected Guatemalans with STDs. Puerto Rican women were used as test subjects for birth control pills without informed consent. some experiencing serious side effects. Forced sterilization programs targeted Black women, Native Americans, and poor women, with approximately 60,000 people sterilized. Prison experiments tested drugs and diseases on inmates. These programs were classified, deleted from medical histories, and victims were silenced. The stupidity of these deletions is that medical records exist. Victims and their families knew what happened. Congressional investigations and FOIA requests eventually revealed many programs. The deletions damaged trust in medical institutions, particularly among minority communities, when the truth emerged. 28. The role of corporations in supporting Nazi Germany was deleted or minimized in post-Faubourg histories. IBM provided technology that helped Nazis track Jews and others for deportation and death. Ford and General Motors factories in Germany produced military vehicles for the Wehrmacht. Standard Oil supplied fuel despite embargoes. IG Farben, including Bayer, used slave labor and produced Zyklon B gas for death camps. Swiss banks held Nazi gold looted from Jews. After WDS, many corporate collaborations with Nazis were deleted or minimized to allow companies to continue operating. The stupidity of these deletions is that Nazi records documented corporate involvement. Holocaust historians uncovered the connections. Lawsuits by survivors and families revealed corporate complicity. The deleted history emerged decades later, showing that profit trumped morality, but post-war rebuilding required ignoring corporate Nazi collaboration. 29. The CIA's role in overthrowing democratically elected governments was classified and deleted from public knowledge for decades. The CIA helped overthrow Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, Operation Ajax, Guatemala's President Jacobo Arbenz in 1954, Chile's President Salvador Allende in 1973, and was involved in numerous other coups. These operations were classified and deleted from public histories when they occurred. The U.S. denied involvement for decades. Declassified documents eventually revealed CIA roles, but only after the damage was done and governments destroyed. The stupidity of trying to delete such operations is that people in the affected countries knew what happened. Evidence eventually leaked or was declassified. The deletions failed while damaging America's credibility. When the truth emerged, it revealed a pattern of undermining democracy abroad while promoting it rhetorically. 30. Lynchings of Black Americans were systematically undercounted and deleted from historical records. From the 1880s, 1960s, thousands of Black Americans were lynched by white mobs, often with complicity or participation of law enforcement. Many lynchings were public spectacles photographed and made into postcards. Yet official records grossly undercounted lynchings, and many textbooks deleted or minimized this terrorism. Local newspapers sometimes didn't report lynchings or described them euphemistically. Death certificates listed false causes of death. Police rarely investigated and almost never prosecuted lynchers. The Equal Justice Initiative's research found over 4,000 lynchings that had been deleted from previous counts. The stupidity of deleting lynchings from records is that families, Black communities, and often entire towns knew what happened. Photos existed. Newspapers in Black communities reported what white papers deleted. Modern research is recovering the deleted history of racial terrorism. 31. The role of rape as a weapon of war was deleted from most war histories until recent decades. Systematic rape occurred in virtually every major conflict, but was deleted from official histories. The rape of Nanking's estimated 20,000, 80,000 rapes were initially deleted from Western histories of W2. Mass rapes by Soviet soldiers entering Germany, Japanese soldiers throughout Asia, and other armies were deleted or mentioned minimally. The comfort women system was deleted from Japanese records. Serbian systematic rape in Bosnia was initially downplayed. The stupidity of deleting sexual violence from war histories is that survivors existed and eventually told their stories. Women's historians recovered deleted accounts. International tribunals prosecuted rape as a war crime, implicitly acknowledging what had been deleted. The deletions silenced victims for decades, but eventually failed when survivors demanded recognition. 32. The Battle of Blair Mountain, America's largest labor uprising, was deleted from most history books. In 1921, 10,000 armed coal miners fought the coal companies and law enforcement in West Virginia in a battle that lasted days. President Harding sent federal troops and army bombers to suppress the miners. Approximately 100 people died. It was the largest insurrection since the Civil War and the only time the U.S. government bombed its own citizens. This massive event was deleted from most American history textbooks. Labor history was systematically minimized in favor of industrial progress narratives. The stupidity of deleting Blair Mountain is that 10,000 armed miners fighting for 5 days with federal troops involved can't really be hidden forever. The battle was documented, photographed, and reported. Labor historians preserved the story even when mainstream textbooks deleted it. 33. The Irish Famine, 1845-1852, was presented in British histories as a natural disaster, while deleting Britain's role in exacerbating the catastrophe. While potato blight triggered the famine, Britain's response made it catastrophic. Ireland continued exporting food to Britain during the famine. British landowners evicted starving tenants. Relief efforts were inadequate and sometimes withheld. Approximately 1 million Irish died and 1 million emigrated. British textbooks deleted British policy failures and presented the famine as unavoidable natural disaster. Irish suffering and British culpability were minimized or deleted. The stupidity of this deletion is that Irish people remembered what happened. Historical records documented British policies. The deleted truth contributed to Irish independence movements. Modern historians acknowledge British policy failures, but for generations, British textbooks deleted Britain's role. 34. The radium girls, whose jaws rotted from painting watch dials with radioactive paint, were initially deleted from corporate history. In the 1920s, young women painted watch dials with radium-based paint, licking brushes to keep them pointed, and ingesting radioactive material. They developed radiation poisoning, their bones disintegrated, jaws fell off, and they died painful deaths. Companies knew radium was dangerous but hid the information and fought lawsuits. The companies tried to delete the story, suppress evidence, and discredit dying women. The stupidity of trying to delete such obvious corporate negligence is that the women and their families fought back legally. Medical evidence proved radiation poisoning. The story emerged despite corporate suppression and led to occupational safety laws. The attempted deletion failed and made corporate callousness more obvious. 35. The Tulsa Race Massacre mentioned earlier is important enough that its deletion process deserves more detail. Beyond deleting it from textbooks, survivors were threatened into silence. Black property owners were forced to sign statements saying they wouldn't sue. Insurance companies denied claims. Death certificates were hidden or altered. Mass graves were never officially acknowledged. Newspapers' coverage was physically removed from libraries and archives. When the 75th anniversary arrived in 1996, many white Tulsans denied the massacre happened, claiming it was exaggerated or made up, showing how successful the deletion had been. The stupidity is that 35 blocks of a city were destroyed, and hundreds died. Photos existed. Mass graves existed, recently found. Survivors lived for decades. No amount of deletion could erase such a massive event permanently, but the deletion prevented justice for generations. 36. Project Paperclip, where the U.S. secretly brought Nazi scientists to America after WFU, was classified and deleted from public knowledge for decades. Over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, many of whom were Nazi Party members or SS members, were brought to the U.S. Their Nazi pasts were whitewashed and their records sanitized. Wernher von Braun, who became a hero of the space program, had used slave labor and knew about concentration camp conditions at his V-2 rocket facilities. The U.S. deleted the Nazi past of these scientists from public knowledge, presenting them as apolitical scientists recruited for the Cold War. The stupidity of this deletion is that many scientists' Nazi involvement was documented. Holocaust survivors recognized some scientists. When declassified documents revealed the truth decades later, it emerged that the U.S. had knowingly recruited war criminals and lied about it. 37. The role of indigenous people in American history beyond obstacles to expansion was systematically deleted. Native American societies, civilizations, governance systems, and contributions were deleted from textbooks. The Iroquois Confederacy's democratic system that influenced the U.S. Constitution was deleted. Native American agricultural innovations were deleted. The complexity and diversity of indigenous cultures was deleted, replaced with stereotypes. The fact that European diseases killed approximately 90% of indigenous populations before most European native contact occurred, meaning Europeans often encountered depopulated lands rather than pristine wilderness, was deleted. The stupidity of these deletions is that indigenous people still exist and maintained their histories orally and in written records. Archaeological evidence contradicted deleted histories. Modern efforts to include accurate Native American history face ongoing resistance from those preferring the deleted version. 38. The Mau Mau Rebellion in Kenya and British torture of suspected rebels was deleted from British colonial histories. In the 1950s, Kenyans rebelled against British colonial rule. Britain detained approximately 150,000 Kenyans in camps where torture was systematic. Methods included rape, castration, beatings, and waterboarding. The British government destroyed records and deleted references to torture from official histories. Documents were burned or hidden in secret archives. When survivors sued in the 2010s, Britain initially denied the torture occurred and claimed no records existed. Eventually, hidden archives were discovered containing thousands of deleted documents, proving systematic torture. Britain settled lawsuits and apologized. The stupidity of deleting such widespread abuses is that tens of thousands of victims existed. Evidence survived despite destruction efforts. The deletion lasted decades, but eventually failed when survivors demanded justice. 39. The role of gay people in history was systematically deleted, with famous figures' sexualities erased. Historical figures known or suspected to be gay had this aspect deleted from their biographies. Leonardo da Vinci's probable homosexuality was deleted. Walt Whitman's sexuality was deleted or downplayed. James Baldwin's sexual orientation was minimized in literary histories. Eleanor Roosevelt's relationship with Lorena Hickok was deleted from her biography for decades. Alexander Hamilton's likely bisexuality was deleted. The Stonewall riots, mentioned earlier, were initially deleted from LGBTQ history. The stupidity of these deletions is that evidence existed in letters, diaries, and contemporary accounts. Modern historians examining original sources recovered deleted sexualities. The deletions harmed LGBTQ people by erasing representation and made histories inaccurate by ignoring important aspects of historical figures' lives. 40. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire that killed 146 garment workers in 1911 was initially minimized, then partially deleted from labor histories. The fire exposed horrific working conditions, locked doors, no fire escapes, and unsafe buildings. Young immigrant women jumped to their deaths to escape flames. The tragedy sparked labor reforms. Yet as labor history was systematically minimized in American textbooks, Triangle was often reduced to a footnote or deleted entirely. The human cost and corporate negligence were deleted while industrial progress was emphasized. The stupidity of deleting such a well-documented tragedy is that it was photographed, extensively reported, and led to famous reforms. Families of victims kept the story alive. Labor historians preserved the truth. Modern textbooks are recovering the deleted labor history. 41. The role of the U.S. in the Vietnam War's My Lai massacre, mentioned earlier, deserves more detail on the deletion attempt. Beyond the immediate cover-up, the broader deletion included minimizing the U.S. military's tactics in Vietnam, free fire zones, body count emphasis, and civilian casualties. Estimates suggest 203 million Vietnamese died in the war, most civilians. American textbooks initially deleted or minimized this, presenting the war as a failed but well-intentioned effort against communism rather than examining the human cost and war crimes. The stupidity of trying to delete such a photographed, reported, and documented war's realities is that veterans knew what happened, Vietnamese people knew, and journalists had documented it. The deletions created a false history that couldn't survive scrutiny. 42. The Harlan County War and other coal mining violence was deleted from most American histories. In the 1930s, miners in Harlan County, Kentucky, fought mine owners and strikebreakers in violent confrontations. People died. Federal troops were deployed. This pattern repeated across coal regions, but labor violence was systematically deleted from textbooks that presented industrial development as peaceful progress. The stupidity of deleting such well-documented conflicts is that they were major news, photographed, and investigated by Congress. Labor historians preserved what textbooks deleted. Songs like "Which Side Are You On" came from these conflicts, ensuring cultural memory survived textbook deletions. 43. Thalidomide's full story was deleted from medical histories in some countries. The drug caused severe birth defects in thousands of children in the late 1950s, early 1960s. Dr. Francis Kelsey at the FDA prevented its approval in the US, saving countless American children. But the full story of how pharmaceutical companies knew about problems, hid evidence, and fought liability was initially deleted from some medical histories. Countries where thalidomide was sold deleted or minimized the scandal. The stupidity of these deletions is that thousands of thalidomide survivors existed as living evidence. The scandal was too large to hide. Eventually, pharmaceutical companies were forced to compensate victims, and the deleted history emerged showing corporate malfeasance. 44. The role of women in resistance movements during WW was deleted from many war histories. Women resistors, spies, and fighters were systematically erased from narratives focusing on male soldiers and leaders. The French resistance's female members were deleted. Soviet female soldiers and snipers were minimized. Female code breakers at Bletchley Park were classified and deleted. Women who saved Jews during the Holocaust were deleted. The stupidity of these deletions is that the women existed and many lived for decades after the war. Their contributions were documented in military records, photographs, and reports. Modern historians recovering women's war stories found extensive evidence that had been ignored or deleted from popular histories. 45. And finally, the full extent of pollution and environmental damage from industrial development was systematically deleted from progress narratives in history books. Rivers catching fire, toxic waste, poisoned communities, and environmental destruction were minimized or deleted from histories celebrating industrial progress. The Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire multiple times from pollution, but this was deleted from Cleveland's progress narratives. Love Canal's buried toxic waste that poisoned a community was initially covered up and deleted. Countless communities poisoned by industrial pollution had their stories deleted from regional histories celebrating industry. The stupidity of deleting environmental destruction while celebrating industrial growth is that the pollution was visible, documented, and affected real communities. Photographs showed rivers on fire. Residents knew they were being poisoned. The deletions created false histories of progress that ignored costs. The environmental movement emerged partly from recovering these deleted stories of environmental destruction, forcing acknowledgement that industrial progress had a price that had been deliberately hidden from official histories. The brutal truth about things deleted from history books is that powerful people, governments, and institutions constantly try to control historical narratives by deleting inconvenient facts. They delete atrocities their governments committed, erase people they disapprove of, minimize suffering they caused, and hide truths that contradict the stories they want to tell. These deletions range from totalitarian governments literally airbrushing people out of photographs to democratic nations minimizing slavery and genocide in textbooks. They include corporations hiding worker deaths, militaries covering up war crimes, and institutions erasing women, minorities, and LGBTQ people from their contributions to history. The pattern is consistent. Delete embarrassing facts, minimize inconvenient truths, sanitize ugly realities, and hope future generations won't discover what really happened. The stupidity is that these deletions almost always eventually fail. Evidence survives. Witnesses exist. Descendants remember. Historians investigate. The truth emerges, often making the deleted facts more famous than if they'd been acknowledged from the start. The deletions did terrible damage. Generations learned false histories, victims were silenced, and patterns of abuse continued because accountability was deleted from the record. But the eventual failures of these deletions show that you can delete facts from textbooks, but you can't delete them from reality. History eventually corrects itself, though the correction often comes too late for justice. Subscribe if you want to remember that history books aren't objective truth, but carefully edited narratives, that those in power try to control what's remembered by deleting what's inconvenient, and that the deleted truths eventually emerge because you can burn documents and censor textbooks. But you can't completely erase events that affected millions of people who remember what the powerful tried to make everyone forget.